In the long history of warfare, few names strike both awe and fear like Hannibal Barca, a man who challenged the might of Rome itself and almost brought it to its knees. His campaigns were not just battles, they were lessons in audacity, deception, and relentless will. Hannibal was born in 247 BC in the great city of Carthage, a wealthy maritime empire on the coast of North Africa, locked in a deadly rivalry with Rome for control of the Mediterranean. His father, Hamilcar Barca, was already Rome's sworn enemy. When Hannibal was just 9 years old, Hamilcar took him to a sacred altar. There, with his small hand resting on a sacrifice, Hannibal swore an oath he would never be a friend to Rome. Raised among soldiers, trained in the arts of war, and fluent in multiple languages, Hannibal became more than a warrior. He became a weapon forged by his father's vengeance. Years later, after the death of his father and his brother-in-law Hasdrubal, Hannibal took command of the Carthaginian forces in Hispania. His first act was bold: to lay siege to Saguntum, a Roman ally. The siege lasted for months, marked by fierce fighting and hunger within the walls. Its fall was more than a victory, it was a declaration. Rome would not forgive, and Hannibal would not wait for them to come. Hannibal's plan was daring beyond belief. He would take the war to Italy itself, striking Rome from the north where they least expected. With around 50,000 infantry, 9,000 cavalry, and 37 African war elephants, he marched through Gaul and toward the towering Alps. Snowstorms lashed his men. Narrow paths crumbled beneath their feet. Alpine tribes ambushed the column. After 2 brutal weeks, only about 26,000 soldiers and a handful of elephants survived. But Hannibal had achieved the impossible. He had brought an army into the heart of Italy. Just months later, Hannibal faced the Romans at the Trebia River, his first major battle on Italian soil. It was midwinter, and the land was frozen under biting winds. Hannibal understood the cold could be as deadly as the sword. At dawn, he sent his Numidian cavalry to harass the Roman camp, provoking the consul Tiberius Sempronius Longus into an aggressive pursuit. Inflamed by pride and eager for glory, Sempronius ordered his army to cross the Trebia, waist-deep, freezing waters that sapped their strength before the real fight even began. On the far bank, Hannibal waited with about 20,000 infantry, 10,000 cavalry, and his surviving war elephants, formed in a broad battle line. But hidden in the tall reeds of a nearby stream was his secret weapon, a concealed force of 1,000 infantry and 1,000 cavalry under his brother Mago, lying in ambush since before dawn. As the soaked and chilled Romans engaged, Hannibal's cavalry swept in from the flanks, crushing their wings, while Mago's troops burst from hiding and struck from the rear. The Roman formation collapsed into chaos. By the time the slaughter ended, more than half of the Roman army lay dead or captured. Hannibal had announced his arrival in Italy with a calculated, merciless brilliance, and Rome had suffered its first taste of the fear that would shadow it for the next decade. A year later, in 217 BC, Hannibal would execute one of the boldest ambushes in military history, the Battle of Lake Trasimene. The setting was perfect for his plan. The lake, surrounded by steep hills, was shrouded in a thick morning fog. Hannibal positioned his Carthaginian troops along the slopes and in the woods, hidden from enemy sight. The Roman consul, Gaius Flaminius, marched with about 25,000 soldiers, confident, believing he was chasing a retreating foe. But every step along the narrow path between the lake and the hills was in truth a step into a deadly trap. At the exact moment, a signal was given. Trumpets blared. From the heights above, spears, arrows, and stones rained down on the Romans, while the Carthaginian cavalry sealed off any escape. Chaos erupted. The sounds of battle mingled with desperate orders, muffled by the curtain of fog. The slaughter lasted for hours. Flaminius himself was killed in combat, and of the thousands of Roman soldiers, only a handful survived to bring word back to Rome. The impact was devastating. The city, once confident, was now gripped by fear. For the first time, Rome understood that Hannibal was not just an enemy, he was an existential threat. But Hannibal's greatest triumph came in 216 BC, the Battle of Cannae. Facing 50,000 Carthaginian troops, the Romans fielded nearly 80,000, determined to crush him once and for all. Hannibal arranged his lines in a subtle curve, inviting the Romans to push forward. As they did, his cavalry crushed their flanks, and his infantry closed the trap. In a matter of hours, the Roman army was encircled and annihilated. As many as 50,000 Romans lay dead. It was a defeat so devastating that mothers in Rome used his name to frighten children. Hannibal ad portas, Hannibal is at the gates. And yet, even after the catastrophe at Cannae, Rome refused to bend the knee. The Senate, grim and unshaken, swore that the Republic would never negotiate with Hannibal, not while a single Roman citizen could bear arms. They changed their strategy entirely. No more meeting him in open battle, where his genius could destroy them again. Instead, they waged a war of attrition. Roman legions avoided set-piece engagements, striking at Hannibal's supply lines, retaking rebel cities, and isolating his Carthaginian allies. Every fortress recaptured, every field burned, was a slow cut meant to bleed his army dry. For years, Hannibal prowled the Italian countryside undefeated, but with fewer men, fewer horses, and no reinforcements from Carthage. The tide was turning, not with a single decisive blow, but with the grinding, relentless weight of Roman endurance. After more than 15 years in Italy, Hannibal was summoned home to defend Carthage from a Roman invasion. In 202 BC, at the Battle of Zama, he faced the Roman general Scipio Africanus. This time, Roman cavalry superiority and Scipio's own tactics turned the tide. Hannibal suffered his first and only great defeat. Hannibal did not surrender to a life of quiet exile. Restless as ever, he traveled across the Hellenistic world, lending his mind and sword to foreign kings. As a military advisor, a commander, and always a strategist without equal. Wherever he went, the shadow of Rome followed, for his name alone still carried the weight of fear. The Senate never forgave him. They hunted him across seas and kingdoms, pressuring rulers to betray the man who had once shaken the very foundations of their republic. By 183 BC, surrounded by enemies and with no escape, Hannibal made his final choice. He drank poison, choosing death over the humiliation of being paraded through Rome as a trophy. Even in his last act, he denied his enemies their victory. His body fell, but his legend never surrendered. Hannibal never conquered Rome, but his genius shaped warfare for over 2 millennia. From Napoleon to modern generals, his battles remain models of strategy, deception, and nerve. Rome called him their greatest enemy. History remembers him as one of the greatest commanders of all time. He was the boy who swore an oath, and the man who made Rome tremble.